How's it going, everyone, and welcome to my third video on how to make a login system. Yes, I'm quite aware this is the third time we're making this video, but I have a good reason to. So on my channel right now, I have a bunch of different project videos, based on PHP or other sort of programming languages, but none of them are actually connected to one another. So my idea is to redo my login system video so I actually have a good fundamental base in order to expand into other different types of project, like for example, a profile system or something to a website. So recreating the login system in a much better way that is much better suited to actually continue building on it is something I thought was quite necessary to do. Just very quickly before we get started here, because I'm actually recording this after having made this whole episode and recorded and everything. This episode will be quite lengthy, so just be prepared that this is going to be a long video. I promise you, at the end of it, you will have a login system. It's going to be I'll try to explain everything as simply as I can to make sure that I'm not just saying, write this, and then you don't have any clue about what is being said in this video. I will explain everything to sort of make you understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So please bear in mind that this is going to be a lengthy video, but it's going to be very good, hopefully. I hope you enjoy it at least. Now, the first thing I just sort of want to talk about is address the lesson file material. You will be able to find everything in this video on my Patreon, or if Patreon at some point in the future gets replaced by something else, then I will have a link for that, including CSS and the HTML and the PHP and everything that's being used in this video here. I should point out that the reason that everything, including the CSS, is inside my lesson material is because people have voted on my channel not to have CSS included into my PHP tutorials, because it takes up I think a third of the time when I also have to explain PHP and CSS at the same time. So just to make this a little bit shorter, a little bit smoother, because you should know HTML and CSS by now, so these things aren't something I should be teaching you in this video. We will just be focusing primarily on the HTML and the PHP. If you have any questions about the lesson material and why you have to go get it on Patreon, just go ahead and read the description of the video or the pinned comment below in the comment section. So let's talk about the actual login system. What exactly are you going to be learning in this video here? Because, there's a lot of ways you can do different systems using PHP. My goal for this video is to make it into the easiest to understand login system tutorial that you might find on YouTube or any other place on the internet for people who has never done anything when it comes to creating a PHP system of some sort. So if you're completely new at PHP and this might be your first project, or maybe you have had a couple of projects before, but you're still quite new at PHP, this is going to help you out tremendously when it comes to understanding how a login system functions. I should point out that this is by no means a login system that is fully fleshed out with all the different security measures that needs to be taken with PHP. If I were to talk about everything regarding security when it comes to PHP, we're going to have a much longer tutorial going. So this is going to cover the basics of how to create a login system so you can take this login system and apply it to your website. And once you learn about any other sorts of security measures that can be taken on your website, just go ahead and include it into this project here. It's very easy for you to customize what we're making in this video here. That being said, the one thing that we will be focusing on in this video is going to be to use prepared statements, which is a way for us to sort of protect the data that we get from users and put into our database, so the user doesn't really, inject any sort of dangerous stuff into the database. So we will be using prepared statements in this video here. Another thing I want to mention as well is that this is a procedural PHP project. I know a lot of people are asking for Object Oriented PHP. I will at some point get to that in the future, but for now, this is for my, people who just started with PHP and wants to learn how to do this sort of thing. So it is going to be procedurally generated PHP that we're going to be making in this video here. I think the title will say Procedural PHP as well. So if you clicked into this video and you're complaining it's not Object-Oriented PHP, you should have read the title before clicking the video. And finally, before we get into it, you will most likely encounter errors along the way, which is something that I usually just see people do when they ask me questions in the comment section. I will have a list of errors inside the description of this video here, with the name of the error you might have, and then what are the possible fixes and why are you getting this error. So if I encounter people having errors, I will try to list them inside the description one by one, just so you kind of have an idea about, okay, so I'm getting like undefined something on line something. What does that mean? Well, it will tell you in the description of this video here. So before we get into actually making this website here, let me actually just demonstrate what exactly we're going to be building this episode, just so you don't, follow along and then at the end you see what we're actually building and you're like, oh, that's disappointing. I didn't know that going into this video here. So let's just talk about what exactly it is we are going to be making once we're done with this episode here. As you can see, I have a very basic website here, and the reason it doesn't look very fancy, it's because I know that CSS or making something that looks visually very complicated can sometimes confuse people who are new to PHP. So I tried to keep it as simple as possible, not to confuse people. For some odd reason, some people who follow my tutorials in my PHP series has an idea that the PHP code that we're doing is not going to work if the CSS doesn't look the exact same way on their website as it does in my website. Just remember, the CSS of a website is only visuals. It's not about how the actual website functions. And because this is a login system tutorial, how the website looks like should not have any impacts on what we're doing this episode. So you can customize the website in any sort of way using CSS. It's not gonna matter. Your website should not necessarily look like my website. Okay, just create something using CSS for yourself. Like I said, it's not an HTML or CSS tutorial. This is a PHP tutorial. Oh gosh, Daniel, why do you have to say that so many times? Well, it's because I get a lot of questions about it every single time. Even though I say it in the video, I will still get comments about it. The lesson material on my Patreon page is in case you can't do something using PHP or you might get an error. Maybe you need to compare my code to yours. It's on Patreon then. So I have this basic website here, and I just created some different pages here just out of fun. We're not really going to do anything with most of these things. What we will be doing is we'll have the home page. We're going to have a sign up page and a login page. The content down here is not something we're going to use for anything because, like I said, it's just placeholder. It's just so you have an idea about us actually having a website here in this little project that we're doing. This is not going to do anything in terms of our PHP. It's just basic junk that I inserted just to make it look good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my sign up form, and what you can do in here is you can type in, different things to sign a person up. You can type in the full name of the person, the email, username, password, repeat the password, click sign up. Somebody's going to get signed up into the website, and once they're signed up, you can go into the login page, type something in. I have a very weak password here. That's something you should probably not do. And once I click sign up, you can see that, suddenly we have the profile page and we have a logout button instead of having the sign up and the login form. So if we click profile page, you can see we don't actually have a profile page yet, but it's something that we're going to be having in the next tutorial, where we're going to learn how to build a profile page using PHP code. Right now, we're going to build this login system here, but I can promise you can actually see that we are logged in because the website is registering that we're logged in by the fact that we have the profile page and the logout button showing. If I were to click logout, we get back to sign up and log in. So, we do get logged in to the website. And like I said, in the next video, we're going to talk about how to actually make changes to the website once you're logged in. How can you put certain type of content into the website when one type of user is logged in, and how can we change the content to fit a second user if that person is logged in? Like, that's the sort of thing we're going to do in the next episode. So just to kind of show what you should be having so far, just so you know where you need to start in order to catch up to this tutorial here. Right now, I have a basic root folder with an index page inside of it. This is my index page. You're going to see a lot of stuff inside my page here, but this is just HTML. We don't need to have the exact same thing. This is just, like I said, junk. So you have something to see inside the browser. Inside my index page, I don't have all the basics covered regarding HTML. All the meta tags aren't there. Certain things are missing. But this is just like bare bone, just to show you exactly how we can get started doing something using PHP. Inside my head tag, you can see we just have some very basic stuff. I linked to a basic font on the internet because I like using special fonts. You don't have to do this. And I linked to a style sheet, which is a reset style sheet inside my CSS folder, inside my root folder. So I have a couple of things in here already. I have a reset page, which you should know about by now. This is something to reset the styling in all the different browsers you might enter. That's good to have. And then I also have my own style sheet that is going to simply allow me to style my website. That's all I'm doing here inside the head tag. If you're already confused at this point, please go watch my HTML and CSS course, because you might have skipped a little bit ahead of where you should be. Like, PHP is usually something you learn after HTML and CSS, just to kind of mention it. If we go down a little bit, you can see that we have a basic navigation. I have a wrapper inside my navigation just to sort of wrap everything inside my header. And inside the wrapper, you can see we have a basic link to an image, just a basic logo that I have inside my website. And underneath the logo, I just simply have just a basic menu, just some basic menu items like a link to the front page, a link to a discover page, which, you know, again, just junk I filled in to have something. But the two important things you should have in here is the sign up page and the login page. So these two different links inside your menu, you should have inside your navigation. If I scroll down a little bit, you can see we have another wrapper. This is going to be the one that contains all the main content of the page. So inside my index page, you can see that I just created a basic section that has an introduction. So this is a introduction. Here is an important paragraph, blah, blah, blah. Again, junk. Below, I also just included a second section with just basic categories. Like, again, just to sort of show you basic categories here. So there's something to show inside the website. And at the very bottom here, you can see we have a basic footer. So I end off my wrapper for all the main content for the website. I have my ending body tag and my ending HTML tag. And then I included a basic JavaScript page or basic JavaScript document into my website, which just has one simple purpose, which I'll just show you here. And that purpose is just simply to, when I click around these pages here, you can see that my link up here at the top changes color based on the page that I'm inside of. So as you can see, it just changes to blue whenever I click around on the website. Again, just junk that you don't have to have inside your website. If you want to learn how to change the navigation buttons into different colors based on the page you're on, I'll make a separate tutorial for that, because this is not anything to do with creating a login system. This is just bonus stuff that I created to just have a cool example to show you guys. So in reality, all you should have is just a basic HTML document with just basic meta tags and a link to a style sheet, and just have a navigation inside the website. You don't even have to have content inside your example. You just need to have this navigation with a basic, list of links that we can click on. And then inside my root folder, you can see I put all my CSS files inside a CSS folder. I also went ahead and created a image folder just because I am actually using a logo inside my navigation here. So I just had a picture inside my image folder for that. And then I have a JavaScript folder just to include any sort of JavaScript that I might be using in the website. Again, this is something that you should not be having in your example unless you want to do it yourself. This is not important to creating a login system. The only thing you should be having is a CSS folder with a reset style sheet and your own style sheet and an index page. That's what you should have right now. But Daniel, why are you not doing all of this step by step and actually creating the HTML file from scratch so we can follow? Well, again, that's because you should already know how to do this by now. This is me throwing shades at you one at a time, telling you, oh, you should be at this point by now. You can't follow this tutorial if you don't have all this stuff already and you don't know what this means. So yeah. So now that you're at the same point as me, because you probably spent some time pausing the video and creating all this stuff so you could follow, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do a thing that you should just get in a habit of doing every single time you make a website that has PHP inside of it, which is we're going to be dividing up the top part of the website, which means the header and the navigation and everything. I'm just going to show you. Everything that is up here, the whole black bar at the top here with the links inside of it, that's something that's going to be on every single page inside the website, meaning that I'm going to take this content, put it inside a separate document and link to it inside my pages inside my website, which means that if I were to go inside my sign up page, it's only this content down here inside the white box that changes. The header up here is the exact same file on every single page, which makes it a lot easier when it comes to changing navigation, changing the logo. You just have to change it in one file and it will change on the whole website. So inside our document here, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to go inside my main project root folder. I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to go ahead and call this one header.php. Inside my header.php, I'm just going to go ahead and grab everything that is going to be inside the header of the website. So if I scroll down a little bit, you can see that this wrapper here starts the main content inside whatever is going to be different of every single page inside the website. So right below my navigation, I'm going to grab this wrapper here and copy all the way up to the top, copy it, delete it, go inside my header.php file, paste it in, and save it. Then I'm going to go back inside my index file, and at the very top here, I'm going to go and open up my PHP tags, and I'm just simply going to go ahead and link or include this header.php inside my index file. So I'm going to say include underscore once, single quotes. I'm going to go and say header.php. And if I were to go ahead and refresh the website, you'll notice that it is the exact same as before, because now there's no visual difference because we didn't break the website. I'm still inside my index page, but in this case here, we're just linking to the content at the very top here, which is just a much better way to do things. And you guessed it, we're gonna do the same thing when it comes to the footer. So we're gonna scroll down, we're gonna grab the footer, I'm gonna grab the closing of the wrapper tag that wraps all the main content of the website, copy it, delete it, save, go up and actually create a new file, call it footer.php, and just paste everything in. Then I'm gonna go inside my index file, gonna copy the include that we have at the top here, just the whole PHP tag. Gonna go to the bottom again, paste it in, and just simply change the link to it. So now it doesn't say header, it says footer.php. And everything should be the exact same way because we didn't actually change anything except for the way that the files are linked together. So now that we have this index page, we're actually completely done doing anything else to this index page. I'm not really going to use it for any other sort of purpose in this video, so we're just going to go ahead and leave this index page for now. I'm going to start moving on to the next step. The next step on our website includes actually making a login page and a sign up page, because right now we do not have anything that the user can click on and go into our website and sign up inside our website. So that's what we're going to do right now. So inside my project file here, I'm just going to go ahead and right click on my root folder. I'm going to say I want to create a new file. I'm just simply going to call this one signup.php, and just go ahead and copy paste everything inside my index page, copy it, and paste it inside my sign up page. Now inside my sign up page, we of course need to change the content. So I'm just going to go and delete, the main content of this page here. And do remember, we're still linking to the header. We're also still linking to the footer. Let's just go and move this over a little bit. And what we're going to do is just simply going to change whatever is inside this section here. Now in my case here, I do actually have some CSS that is set up for my particular sign up form. So I'm just going to go ahead and change it here. So it's just sign up. I'm just going to say form, and inside the actual content, let's just go and delete what we have here because we don't need to have a intro paragraph or header. So what I'll do here is I'll go ahead and create a h2 tag, and inside the h2 tag, we're just simply going to call this one sign up. Spelling mistake. Then below the h2 tag, we're going to create a basic HTML form, because in case you don't know, the main way that we communicate with users inside a website is by having them fill out something inside a form, and when they submit the form, we do something with the data from the form. That's the primary way we interact with users when it comes to them giving us any sort of input. So inside this form here, I'm just going to go ahead and delete the class because we don't actually need that. We just need basic HTML. And I'm going to go and change the action that I have in here. So the action is going to be the page that we're getting sent to when the form is submitted. So what we do is we take all the inputs from this form and we put it inside the URL and pass it on to the next page inside the URL. That's how we pass data from one document or one page inside our website to another. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the action is going to be a signup.inc.php. And now you might be very confused because why did I just call it signup.inc.php? The .inc inside the name is just simply a very creative way for me to say that this is a include file. This doesn't change the actual format of this document here. It's just basic a name. So I could also, if I wanted to, have called it signup-inc.php or something. So in the future, if you have any questions about why I might name my file .inc or why I might not include .inc, if I don't put .inc inside my files, it means that the file is actually a page that the user is seeing inside the website. If there is a .inc inside the file name, it means that the user is not actually seeing the file, it just has a basic PHP script that runs inside of it. And in this case here, I think it makes sense that because this is what is going to be handling the sign up part of the website when the user needs to get signed up inside the website, it makes sense to call it signup.inc.php. Now, the thing is here though, that I'm not going to put this file inside the main directory of my root folder. So what I'll do is I'll right click on my folder, and I'll go ahead and say I want to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this one includes. So inside my includes folder is going to be where I'm going to save and create this new file called signup.inc.php. So I'll right click on it and I'll say I want to create a new file, and I'm going to call this one signup.inc which again stands for includes .php. I'm going to go back to my regular sign up page, and inside here we're just going to go ahead and continue creating this form here. Now in this case, with the method inside our form attributes, we're just going to go ahead and keep it at post because we don't want the actual data to be visible inside the top of the URL. It's still going to get passed on to the next page, but we won't be able to see it inside the URL. And that's important because we do actually have some sensitive data here, like a password. Don't want to show that to anyone. So I will be keeping the post method here. Inside the form, we're going to have a whole bunch of inputs that the user can type something into, one for the full name, one for the password, one for the email, different sort of things. So what I'll do here is I'll just go and create a input HTML tag, and I'll set the type as text. The name is going to be something that we use once we do actually want to do something with this data using PHP. So this is a very important attribute. So in this case here, because this is going to be the full name the user is going to type in, I'm just going to go ahead and call this one name. Now the value is going to get replaced by placeholder. If you don't know what placeholder does, I do recommend just sort of looking it up on Google or something. Or I can just explain it very quickly. The placeholder just simply writes a little, transparent sort of text inside the input that tells the user, okay, what are you supposed to type into this input here? In this case here, I'm going to tell it that this is going to be full name ... So the user knows what they're supposed to type in. And then I'm just going to go ahead and copy this and paste it down 1, 2, 3, 4 times. In the second one, I'm going to change it into email because I want the user to submit an email as well. Then I want to change full name to email because that makes sense. Then I want to change the next one into UID because this is going to be the username that the user is sending to us because they need to have a username on the website. So I'll just go ahead and say username inside the placeholder. The next one is going to be a password. So I'm going to call this one PWD inside the name. I'm also going to change the type into password. And what this does is that when the user starts typing something into this input inside the website, it won't actually type out the letters, like the actual word that the user is typing into the input. It's just going to show us like little star symbols. So if there's a person standing behind the person while he's making his password, they can't look over his shoulder and see what he's typing in. So that is what we're going to go ahead and include in here. I'm going to go ahead and include that inside the bottom one as well, because this is going to be a PWD repeat, because this is a repeated password. And then we're going to change the placeholders for these two. So password and then repeat password. Like so. The last thing we're going to include inside this form is just going to be a basic button. So I'm going to say button, which is going to be a type as submit. And inside the name, I'm just simply going to give it a name as submit. And this is going to make sense once we get to the PHP part. So just create a name equal to submit for now. Inside the button, I'm just going to say sign up, save it. And that's basically what we need to have inside the sign up page. A little bit later in this tutorial here, we will actually need to do something below here under the sign up page where we do actually include error messages in case the user, types in a username that already exists inside the database, or if the user didn't fill in all fields, that type of thing. Then we will be able to include error messages down here. For now, let's just go ahead and do that a little bit later. Let's not worry about it right now. So with this, let's actually go ahead and see what we have inside our website. So we have refresh, go to sign up. You can see that right now we just have a very basic sign up page. Now, just for the sake of my own HTML and CSS styling, because as you can see, the form is just sort of slide over to the side, I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit of styling to my website here. Just something that I personally do, because this is something that I included inside my CSS. So you don't have to have this. This is just something for me personally. So it looks somewhat nice. So if I save this, you can go ahead and see that now it looks like this. It's again, basic junk styling that I just include inside my website here. So the next thing we need to do is we're going to create the login page, because if we were to click on it, you can see, there's no file called login.php inside our website. So let's go and go back inside our document here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my root folder. I'm going to say new file. I'm going to call this one login.php. I'm just going to go ahead and copy everything that I have inside my signup.php file, which is right here. Copy everything. Paste it inside my login.php, so we have the exact same thing in there. And I'm just going to change a few details here. So instead of it saying sign up, I just wanted to say login. I think is that 2 words? We'll just go ahead and put in 2 words for now. Now we do need to change a few things here. So we need to change the action inside the form, because when we log into the website, we don't want to run the same PHP script as when we sign up inside the website. So what I'll do here is I'll say login.inc.php instead, which also means that I need to go inside my includes folder, right click, make a new file, call this one login.inc.php, which is just going to be containing the basic PHP script that is going to log in the user inside this website here. Then back inside our login.php file, we're just going to go ahead and delete a bunch of different inputs. We don't need to have 2 of these different inputs, just the regular ones. We do need to have a password one, and we do need to have a button. So we just have 2 inputs and a button for now. Inside the first input, I do want the user to type in either their email or their username, because I want them to be able to use both of these if they want to use either one when they want to log into the website. Because I get people asking me about how to do that, so we might as well just do it in this episode here. So I'm gonna type username / email, just so they have an option of either one when it comes to signing up. Below here, we just want them to type in the password, so this doesn't need to be changed in any sort of way. And we also need to change the text inside the button here, so it needs to say log in, like so. And just like inside the signup.php file, at some point a little bit later in this tutorial, we will be making some error handlers below here. So if the user is making an error, like not typing something into one of the inputs, we can actually write an error message below here. We're not going to do that right now though. So now we actually basically have the entire website made when it comes to HTML and CSS. And the next part is going to be actually creating the PHP part. So we're going to connect to the database, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that the user can actually go to our website, click the login page or the sign up page, write something in, submit it, and either sign up or log into our website. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to go ahead and go inside my includes folder, right click, create a new file. And I'm going to go ahead and call this one dbh.inc.php. And dbh stands for database handler, which means that this is going to be the file that handles actually connecting to the database. So we can then later on, when we need to connect to any sort of data inside the database or pull out data or insert data or something, then we just simply refer to a variable inside this file in order to get a connection going to the database. So this is going to be a very important file just to simply connect to our database. Inside this file, I'm just going to go and open up my PHP tags. Now, I'm not going to go and close off my PHP tags, and this is a question that I also get quite often. If I were to close off my PHP tag, whoops, let's actually do it properly, like so, and were to have some PHP code inside of here, and then later on, by accident, leaving a couple of different empty lines underneath my closing tag, this can actually throw a error or do something wrong inside your website. This is something that can actually go ahead and do something bad. Also, if you were to accidentally type something or go ahead and click space or going to just, do something, it's going to end up bad. So a small trick here, when you have any sort of document that only contains PHP code, like this document is going to do, just go ahead and don't have a closing tag for the PHP opening and closing tag. Just open up the PHP and then just leave it open. So inside of here, in order to connect to the database, we need to give it a little bit of information about our database, such as what is the, the server name, what is the username, the password, what is the database name of the database they want to connect to. So in this case here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable. I'm just going to call this one server name. Then I'm going to go ahead and set it equal to double quotes, semicolon. Just going to go ahead and copy this down 3 more times and just change the names of them. The second one, we're going to go ahead and set to our database username. So db username. We're also going to change the third one to db password. And the last one down here is going to be just a database name. So db name. In my example here, I'm using XAMPP at the moment in order to connect to my database and connect to my server and everything here. So in my example here, I need to type in localhost because I'm using a local database using XAMPP. And I also need to go ahead and include a username, which is going to be root. The password is by default when using XAMPP empty, so we're not going to do anything in there. And then the database name depends on what I called my database inside my PHP, my admin, which is the place where we create databases and tables and all that different data is going to get thrown in there. We haven't done that yet. So, we'll do that in a second. But for now, let's just go ahead and give our database some sort of name. So we're going to go ahead and call this one, I don't know, PHP project 1 or something, because that's what I called it inside my notes here. Just know you can call this anything you want. You can call this login system or something, you know, if you want to change the name of it. Below here, we're going to go ahead and create a variable called variable con, which is going to be the connection that is actually going to, you know, open up a connection to our database so we can actually do something with the database. In this tutorial here, we're going to be using MySQLi. I should probably also write that in the title so people don't get confused. A lot of people ask about PDO. It's very important to note here that MySQLi is something used for procedural PHP. PDO or MySQLi is something you can use for Object Oriented PHP. So because this is a procedural PHP tutorial, the option that we have is MySQLi. Okay, I often get people asking me why you're not using PDO because that's just so much better or something. And I just want to point out, for that argument, for Object-Oriented PHP, PDO has some good things about it and some bad things about it. MySQLi has good things about it, bad things about it. It's about which purpose or what exactly you're making that might make you want to choose one or the other. It's not that one is just definitely better than the other one in all situations. It's very much about what exactly you're sitting here doing. But like I said, we're doing a procedural PHP project right now, so we only want to focus on MySQLi. To that, I also have another thing just to really quickly add, because I will get people asking this in the comments. No, we are not using MySQL functions inside our code right now. We're using MySQLi. MySQLi is the updated version that replaced MySQL some years ago, because MySQL is not secure, okay? MySQLi is very much up to date. This is not MySQL. Just want to point that out because some people are raging in the comments saying, why are you using MySQL to, you know, do stuff with your database? That is not secure. That is outdated. You should know that by now, Daniel. And to that, like I said, we're using MySQLi. So right after the equal sign, I'm just going to go ahead and create a MySQLi function underscore connect parentheses. And inside this function here, which is a built-in function inside PHP, we're just simply going to drag and drop these different variables that we created up here that this particular function needs in order to give it what it needs in order to connect to our database. So we're going to give it the server name, going to give it the username. I'm also going to give it the password. And last but not least, we're going to give it the database name for the database that we're connecting to. Then below here, we're also just going to create a very quick if statement that is going to just let us know if there's any sort of errors happening with the connection. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that inside here, we want to say if our connection fails by saying variable con and then putting a exclamation mark in front of it, which means that if this returns as false, then we do want to write out some sort of error message or something. First of all, we want to just kill off whatever we're doing here by writing die. And we also want to spit out a message on the browser that says, okay, what exactly is going wrong here? So we're just going to say connection failed, colon, and then we're just simply going to add in another PHP function called MySQLi underscore connect underscore error, which is going to spit out the specific error that we're encountering inside if you were to actually get an error message. And this is basically all we need to do here. So now the next step is that we did actually include a database name inside our database variable up here, but we haven't actually created the database that we're going to put all the data from our website into. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go and open up my browser. I'm going to write localhost /PHP myadmin. That should be. And again, this is something that sometimes happens when you want to write stuff in on Google. I'm not searching for PHP myadmin. I actually want to access PHP myadmin. And there we go. So localhost /PHP myadmin. And now we have our database, or at least the place that we can create databases inside our browser here. This particular database setup system with PHP myadmin is the most common thing you'll see with hosting companies around the world when you want to, you know, rent a server by some sort of hosting company, and you need to go in and need to copy your database from your local version of your website into the online version of the website. This is going to be what most people are using, just to point that out. So inside PHP myadmin, I'm going to go to databases, And over here, you want to type in the name of your project. So in this case here, I wrote that it was going to be PHP project 01 and just go ahead and create it. Now I do already have mine created over here. As you can see, I do already have some data inside of it. I have a users table. You shouldn't have that yet, but by now you should actually have your PHP project 01 on the left side over here, so you can actually see your database. This is something you should know by now, but all these different things here are actually databases that you've created inside your PHPMyAdmin. Some of them will be in here from the start once you install this program for the first time. As you can see, I do have some other stuff in here that I didn't actually create, but you should know that this is your database sitting over here. The next thing we're going to do to our website so we can actually continue building our login system is we're going to go ahead and create the users table inside our database. As you can see, I already have mine here, but I will actually go ahead and show you exactly what you're going to do in order to create a users table. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and click on your database over here. You want to make sure that you have this database selected. Once you've done that, we're going to go up into the SQL tab up here at the top. And then we're going to go ahead and type in the SQL that we're going to actually insert into our website here. Let me just go ahead and zoom in for you. Is that good enough? Can you actually see what I'm writing here? Okay. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and create a new table, and I want to call this one users. Then I'm going to say parentheses, semicolon. And I'm just going to go ahead and move the parentheses and the semicolon down to the next line. So we're actually, creating a little bit of space or some lines in between here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create some columns inside this users table. So in case you don't know, the users table is going to contain all the data that we want to collect regarding users inside our website. In this case here, I just want to know about the user's name, like what is the name of the person. I want to know what their email address is. I want to know what their username is going to be. And I also want to know the password they selected in order to log into this website here. So the first column that I'm going to create inside this table here is going to be the user ID. And yes, you are correct. I didn't mention the user ID 2 seconds ago when I mentioned all the different data we're going to save from the user, because the user ID is something that's going to auto-generate as users are signing up one by one. So what I'll do here is I'll go ahead and call this one users, because that's the name of the table. So just a naming convention is to call it the name of the table and then what the column is going to be named. So users ID. Now, I should mention that the user's ID, like I said, auto-generates and creates a new number one at a time. So when the first user on your website signs up, this one is going to be called 1. Then when the second user signs up to your website, he's going to be user number 2. And it's just going to keep counting up automatically when users are signing up inside your website. And one question that I get constantly is, okay, so let's say you have 10 users inside your website and one user decides, oh, you know what? I don't want to be part of this website anymore. Just go ahead and delete my account. So what is going to happen is, let's say user number 3 decided that he's not going to be part of this website anymore, so he gets deleted from the database. You will have an empty slot. So you're going to have user 1, user 2, user 4, user 5, and so on. But you're not going to have a user 3 inside your website. The thing that people are asking is, okay, how do I make sure that the next user that signs up inside the website gets the username as user number 3? Because there's going to be this weird hole or this weird gap in numbers when it comes to the user IDs that will exist inside your database column. The reason you should not worry about there being a gap inside your data is because these user IDs are unique to the users that are assigned to them. You should see these IDs that are assigned to the user as your social security number. If a person in real life were to go and pass away, you don't start moving every single citizen in the country and give them a new social security number because, oh, it makes more sense in the system. Like, that's just going to confuse the heck out of every single citizen inside the country. So in the same way here, if a user were to not want to be part of this website anymore and were to just go ahead and delete his account, then you just need to be okay with the fact that there's going to be an empty slot for user number 3. There's nothing you should do about it. If you were to try and forcefully do something about it and go into the database and manually start changing the numbers so they actually have no gap between them, you're going to mess up the entire database structure. Don't do it. So now that we got that cleared out, let's go ahead and talk about the next thing we're going to write for this column here. So the next thing we need to write is what sort of data we're going to have in here. We're just going to have numbers. So I'm just going to write int 11. We're not saying that there can be 11 users. We're saying that, 11, numbers after each other. That's like, you know, the maximum number capacity, which is like a lot of users inside your website. So don't ask too many questions about this. 11 should be plenty of users for your website. So with this, we're just going to go ahead and continue. The next thing we're going to write is that this is going to be the primary key of this particular table here, which means that this is going to be the unique identifier of every single user inside this particular table here. Remember when I talked about social security number? That's basically what we're labeling this particular column as. The next thing we're going to add in is auto_increments. And the reason we want to add this in is because now it's automatically going to increase each user by 1 automatically every single time a new user signs up. So you don't have to worry about it yourself. And then we also want to add not null at the end here, comma. Don't worry about it going down to the next line. If I were to zoom out just one more, you can see that this is still on one line. So going down to the next line here, I'm just going to go ahead and copy what we have on that line and paste it in. And I'm going to change the second one to user's name. So now we need the full name of the user. I'm going to go ahead and call this one Vacha and set it to 128. You could basically write text or something if you wanted that for this as well. So if you wanted to have a much longer amount of text inside of it, you just write text. Afterwards, we're going to delete primary key because that is only allowed for this column up here. We're also going to go ahead and remove the auto increment because we don't need that. And that's basically all we want to have here. I'm going to copy, paste below. The next one is going to be the user's email. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to change the user's, like the name of the column to user's email. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to go down to next line, paste it in. And then we're going to change this one to user's UID, which is the username of this user here. Then I'm going to go down to next line, paste it in again. And then we're going to have the password. And then we're just going to write PWD. And we do want to remove the last comma right afterwards here because this is the last entry, so we don't want to have a separation comma. And once you have this, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and click Go. And once you do that, it's going to give you a users table inside your database. Okay, like I have mine already, so I don't actually need to submit it again. So I'm just going to leave this page. And you should go ahead and actually have this users table here. And just to show you with my version of the database here, because I do already have some users inside my database, you're not going to have any, but I do already have some in there. You can actually see the gap that I was talking about inside the user ID. So you can see that right now it says 1, 3, 4. And some people asking me, okay, how do we make this person number 2 instead, and then the other one number 3? And it's just really important to point out here that you should not be touching the user ID when it comes to this column here. Just leave it as it is. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go inside our signup.inc.php file, which right now currently is completely empty because we didn't actually insert any sort of PHP code in here. So what I want to do is I first of all want to start up my PHP tags, because, you know, we're actually running PHP code inside this file here. I'm going to go ahead and delete the ending tag because, like I mentioned previously with the DBH page, we don't actually need to have an ending tag when it comes to just having PHP code inside this file here. Now, the first thing we're going to do in here is we're going to go ahead and check if the user actually got to this page the proper way, which means that if he actually went into our sign up form inside our website and entered data into the form and clicked the submit button, did he actually get to the page by clicking that submit button? Because it is actually possible to go inside our website and just go into the URL and say, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and access signup.inc.php by saying I want to go into the includes folder. I want to say /signup.inc.php. And now I'm actually inside this document here. We don't want that to be able to be a thing that the user can do. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm just going to go ahead and create an if statement that says if the user actually submitted the form the proper way, then we want to run the PHP code inside this file here. But if they didn't get to this page the proper way, then we want to send them back to the sign up page. And remember that I mentioned that we pass data from a form using the URL. What we did here inside our form, if we were to go inside our sign up page, is I actually went ahead and gave our button a name set equal to submit, which means that the data from inside the form here will also include a submit through the button that we put in. So what I can do is going back inside our signup.inc.php is I can ask using a PHP function that is built into PHP if I have set a particular piece of data inside the URL. And if it is there, then the user accesses this page using the correct method. So what I'll do is I'll say, okay, I'm going to use the function called isSet, which means that if this is set inside the code, then do continue whatever you're doing. If this is not set, just throw the user back to the sign up page or something. So I'm going to go ahead and say that we have a global, or a super global it's called, which is a post method that is called submit. Then the user actually did access this page the proper way. So just to show an example of what exactly we did, I'm just going to go ahead and echo, just echo it works or something. And I'm going to go ahead and create an else statement. And the else statement is just simply going to send the user back to the sign up page if they did not do this correctly. So I'm going to create a header function, which is also a function inside PHP that can, do something like, for example, sending the user back to a particular place. So I'm going to go ahead and write location, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the link to the page that I want to send the user to. So in this case here, we're inside a includes folder at the moment. So I want to go back one directory by writing .. and then I want to access signup.php. So with this, if I were to go back inside the website, refresh, you can see that I didn't actually access this page correctly, so it just sent me back to the sign up page. But if I were to actually type in some data, let's just type something random, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and we do actually get an error message, and I do know why we're getting it. So if we were to go back inside our document here, let's go ahead and go back inside signup.php, because inside our action here, like I said, we're inside an includes folder. So we should have written includes /signup.inc.php. So now it should work properly, but let's just go ahead and check that we also did the same thing inside our login. We did not. So let's just go ahead and say includes /login.inc.php. Congrats to you if you did actually see this when I made the error. And with these changes, let's go ahead and go back inside our browser. Do make sure to refresh the browser, otherwise this is not going to work. And just go ahead and type everything in one more time. Let's just go ahead and type the same thing as we did before. QWE. And as you can see, it says it works. And we also do get some some stuff here. Just ignore that thing. So now that we know that that works, we're going to go ahead and continue actually building the actual script that will do something if the user is trying to sign up inside our website. So in between the if statement here, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and actually grab the data from inside the URL so we have it ready to be used inside our script here. And I can do that by creating a couple of different variables. So I'll write variable name, just going to set it equal to, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy what we have up here because I'm also going to be grabbing super globals here. In this case, I'm going to be grabbing a super global that we labeled as name. If I were to go back inside our sign up form, you can see that the name attribute inside our first input is equal to name, which means that in order to grab the data from this input here, we need to reference to the super global called name. So with that information, we can go ahead and just copy paste a couple of times. So we're just going to say 1, 2, 3, 4 times. The second one is going to be the email. So we're just going to write email. And the attribute was set to email inside our form as well. The third one was going to be the username. So I'm just going to write username. And it was set to UID inside the form. The fourth one we set to PWD, which was the password. And then we're also going to do PWD repeat. So now we have all the data that we passed in from the form, and now we can actually start doing something with the data to, for example, check if the user signed up correctly. The process of trying to figure out if the user made a mistake inside the website is called error handling. So we're going to do a bunch of different error handlers below here to catch any potential mistakes that the user or any sort of mistakes that we might have made inside the website. The way we're going to do this is using a bunch of different functions. So what we want to make sure we do is we link to another document inside our website here that has a bunch of PHP functions in it, including the error handlers that we want to run. So what I'll do here is I'll go ahead and require _once. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and require the dbh file that we created. So dbh.inc.php. Now do remember we're already inside the includes folder inside this document here. So we don't need to say we want to go into the includes folder. Then I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste this. And I'm just going to go ahead and say we also want to connect to a functions.inc.php file. Now this page we haven't actually created yet. So let's just go ahead and do that. So I'm going to right click on includes, say new file, functions.inc.php. And this document here is going to have a bunch of different functions in it that we can reference to in order to do things inside our website. And we're just going to hold on a little bit with making the actual functions, because for now, I just want to go ahead and use the functions that we haven't created yet in order to just sort of finish up this particular page inside our signup form or inside the signup.inc.php file. So going down a couple of lines, what I want to do next is I want to go ahead and use the actual functions that we haven't created yet in order to catch any sort of errors that might be happening inside the website. The first type of error that I want to see if I can catch is the fact that if the user left any inputs empty, which means that he might have forgotten to put anything into the username or the password or the name, then I want to tell the user that, oh, hold on a second there, sir. You forgot to put something into one of the inputs. So what I'll do is I'll create an if statement. And inside the condition of this if statement, I want to reference to a function, like I said, that we haven't created yet. Now, all the functions that I'm going to create for these error handlers are going to return true or false. Meaning that we can just simply say, well, if this is true, then there was an error mistake inside the code. If this is false, then it means that there's no errors inside the code. So I'm going to say that I have a function called empty input signup, parentheses, because this is a function. And I'm going to set this one not equal to false. The reason that we can't just write equal to true is because if by any sort of chance that this is going to return back as anything besides true or false, then it is going to see this as not being an error, even though it is technically an error because we want to have false in order for it to continue. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying if it's anything besides false, then throw an error. Okay, because there's a big difference between is it equal to true or is it not equal to false, even though they may seem like the same thing. So inside the if statement, I just want to say, well, okay, there's clearly a error happening here. So I want to send the user back to the sign up page and just sort of start over again. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy the header tag that we have down here and paste it in. And I also want to include an exit down below here. Now the exit statement is just basically going to stop the script from running entirely, which is why we want to include it in here. And I'm also just going to go ahead and include the exit down here below just to sort of have it there to make sure the script stops if anything happens here. And then of course we want to go ahead and include an error inside this link here when we send the user back to the sign up page, because remember, at some point later in this tutorial, we will be creating some error messages if they made a mistake, you know, below the sign up form or something, so the user knows what they did wrong. So the way we do that is by sending back the user to the sign up page with some information inside the URL that we can then use on the page in the same way as we're grabbing data up here in order to get some information about like what is going on exactly at the moment. So if I send the user back with this inside the URL, question mark, and then say error is equal to empty input, then I can grab this error inside the signup page and say, okay, well, if error is equal to empty input, then the user clearly forgot to type something in inside the form. And we need to create an error message that says, oh, you forgot to type something into the form. The last thing we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and pass in some variables inside this function here, because right now I can't actually see what was submitted by the user to test if they were empty or not. So I do need to go inside the parentheses here and pass in these variables so I can use them inside the function to test if they are actually empty. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy name, paste it in, comma, email, paste it in, comma, username, paste it in, comma, password, paste it in, comma, and password repeat. And there we go. So now that we created this one, the next thing we can do is we can actually go ahead and check if the username that the user typed in is a proper username. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and copy exactly what we created here, paste it below. And I'm just going to go ahead and change the name of the function. So it's called invalid UID. And remember, we haven't created these functions yet. These functions is something that we, the developer, is going to create after we're done with this. So just keep in mind that we haven't created these yet. So I'm just going to delete all the different inputs that we have here. And I'm only going to paste in the username. Then I also want to check if it is a proper email the user has submitted. You know, in case the user forgot to add an @ symbol or something inside the email, then we will be able to tell if he made a mistake regarding the format of the email. So I'll also go ahead and say we want to check for a invalid email. And we're going to go ahead and paste in the email down here. And now we do also need to remember to change the actual error messages that we send the user back with. So it's not going to be empty input for the second one. It's going to be invalid UID. And then the next one down here is going to be invalid email. And then I want to create another one. In this case, we're going to go ahead and check if the passwords were not the same passwords, because remember, we wanted the user to include the password 2 times to make sure that they actually repeated the same password 2 times in a row, just to make sure the user doesn't type anything wrong when it comes to the, the password. They sign themselves up and then suddenly the password doesn't match when they're trying to log in because they just had to type it once and they might have made a typo the first time. So this is a good thing to have the user type the password 2 times when they try to sign up. So to do this, I'm going to call on a function that we create called password match. And I'm going to go ahead and say I want to include the 2 different passwords inside the password match here. So I'm just going to say we have variable password and variable password repeat, and then just go ahead and check these 2. Then I'm going to change the error message to say passwords don't match or something. This might be too long. You can go ahead and include something else if you want to, if you think this is too much. And then I'm going to go ahead and include a final one, which is going to be if the username already exists inside the database. Because if the user is trying to sign himself up as, username crossing, but crossing has already been taken inside the database, then we want to tell the user that it's not going to be possible because the username is already taken. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call in a function called UID exists. Then I'm just going to go ahead and pass in my connection to the database, because we do need to connect to the database to check this error handler here. So I want to make sure that I include the connection to the database. And I'm also going to include the username, because remember, we need to actually, check the username. So we need to pass the username into this function to gain access to it. And we also want to make sure we change the error message here to username taken. So now if we got to this point, it means that the user made no mistakes. And I just want to point out, you yourself can add many more error handlers if you want to. Like I said, in a second, we'll actually create these different functions here. For now, we're just leaving them and then we'll create them soon. But you can just go ahead and include more error handlers if there's anything else you want to check if the username has not done. One example could be maybe the password should be a little bit longer than like maybe 6 characters, just to make it a little bit stronger. You can just go ahead and create a function that checks if the password is longer than 6 characters, then everything is okay. Just to give you some examples of what you could do to make this into a more complete login system. My purpose with this tutorial is just to kind of show you some of the basic examples here of how we can do error handlers, and then you need to think for yourself how to make more of them. And then last but not least, if we got to this moment, the user made no mistakes and there's nothing wrong with whatever they typed in. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and sign up the user into our website. And again, we're going to go and do that using a function. So I'm going to say we have a create user function. And inside the parentheses, I want to include some parameters because we need to pass in some data into this function for it to do something with it. I'm going to pass in the connection because we need to connect to the database in order to actually sign up a user into the database. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to include the actual data that the user sent us, so we can actually fill it into the database. So we're going to say variable name, variable email, we're going to say variable username, and we're also going to go ahead and say we want to include the password. And this is basically everything we need to do inside the signup.inc.php file. So now the only thing we need to do to get the signup system working is to just create the functions that we just referenced to inside this page here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and make things a little bit easier for myself, because when we start creating these functions, I want to still be able to see the functions inside signup.inc.php, but I also want to be able to write inside my functions.inc.php file. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab my functions page. I'm going to drag it down at the bottom here and just sort of let go. So now we can see the functions that we created inside our signup process. And we can see the functions page down here that has no functions inside of it so far. Inside functions.inc.php, we're going to go ahead and create the first function after we actually open up the PHP tags. And remember, this is going to be a pure PHP document, which means that we're not going to have any sort of closing tag at the end there. So in here, I want to create this function. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy it, paste it in, and this is going to be the one that checks for empty fields. So at the end here, we want to make sure we add curly brackets, and we also go ahead and state that this is in fact a function that we're creating. So we're creating a function called empty input signup. We have all the proper parameters inside the function to make sure they're passed in. And then we just want to make sure we write some code in between the curly brackets here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating a variable called result, which is going to be what returns the true or false statement once we're done here. I'm not going to assign it true or false yet because we haven't actually figured out whether this is true or false before we actually tested the data that was passed in. So what I'm going to do below here is I'm going to go ahead and create an if statement. And inside the if statement, I'm going to use a function called empty, which is built into the PHP language, which is going to check whether or not there is data or if there's no data inside whatever I'm pasting inside the function here. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and grab variable name, paste it in. And what this is going to do is that if there is no variable name inside this variable here, like if there's no data inside of it. So in this case, if the user didn't submit something, then it's going to run whatever code is inside the if statement. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pass in the other different parameters as well. So I'll go ahead and include two pipe symbols, which means or, which is basically, okay, so if this one is empty, or if the next one here is empty, so I'm just going to copy paste, which is going to be the email, then if either one of these two is empty and the user didn't submit anything, then it's going to return whatever's inside the if statement. You kind of see where we're heading at here. So I'm just going to keep copy, pasting it in. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just going to paste these in one at a time. So we have the email, username, password, password repeat. And these all need to be not empty in order for this to return as false. So if there is any sort of empty inputs, then I'm going to say, okay, variable result is going to be equal to true because there is a mistake here. So if there's a mistake, we're going to return it as true. However, if there's no empty fields, then I want to make sure the result is equal to false. And then at the very bottom here, after the else statement, I'm simply going to return variable result. And the reason that I create a variable result at the top here and not inside the actual if statements is because we would just have to rewrite the code inside every single if statement. And in order to minimize the amount of code we write, we just simply state the variable first, or declare it as we call it, and then return it at the bottom here instead. So we don't do everything twice inside each of these statements here. So now what we do is we just go ahead and copy paste what we have here, paste it below. And we're going to go ahead and change the function name to the next one. So this one is called invalid UID. So we're just going to copy the whole thing with the parameters. We're going to paste it in. So if the user's username is not a proper username, then we want to throw an error message by setting result equal to true. So what I want to do here is inside the initial if statement is I don't want to check if there's any empty fields, because remember that is what we checked for in the previous function. In this one, I want to check if there's certain types of characters or if there's not certain types of characters inside the username. So I want to run a preg_match function, which is built into the PHP language. And preg_match is something that I have done a couple of tutorials on. I don't remember if it was JavaScript or PHP, but this is something where we basically write a search parameter. And then if the string that we match up with the search parameter doesn't match up, then it's going to throw an error, basically. So what I want to do here is I want to say, okay, well, I want to add in this preg_match parameter, or the search algorithm that we're using here. So I want to say /. I'm not entirely sure what that arrow is called in English, but the little pointy up arrow. And then I want to go ahead and create brackets. And inside the brackets, we're going to write in the search algorithm that we want to use in order to test whether or not the username is properly formatted. So I want to make sure that if there is A through Z, then we want to approve this. If there's also A through Z as capitalized letters, because we should allow capitalized letters inside a username. And I also want to check if there's numbers from 0 till 9, then this is going to get approved. Then after the brackets, I want to make sure we write a multiplication symbol, $, and then simply a /. And this is going to be the search algorithm that we're going to be matching up with the username that the user typed in. The second parameter inside this function here, so we're going to say comma space, is going to be the actual username that the user submitted. So we're going to paste that in. Now, this is going to do kind of the opposite of what we wanted to do, because what it's testing here is whether or not this is true or false. So what I want to do here is I want to check if this does not return as true. So if there is a mistake, by writing exclamation mark in front of the function, then I want to say, okay, well, there was a mistake. So therefore I'm going to set result equal to true, which means there's a mistake. And then we're going to send the user back to the sign up page. Then we have the next function. So we're just going to copy paste what we have here, which is called invalid email. So we're going to paste in the function down here. Let's just go ahead and move this up so we can actually see what we're doing. Invalid email. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy the name of it, paste it in. And in this case here, we don't want to check for a search algorithm like we did with the to check the username. We do actually have a built-in function inside PHP that can check whether or not an email is correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write filter underscore var parentheses. And inside of here, I want to paste in, first of all, the email that we want to test. And I also want to include a statement called filter underscore validate underscore email. So this is a built-in function inside PHP that can simply take a variable and say, okay, if the first parameter here is a proper email, then go ahead and return this as true. But because we're checking for errors first, that's just a habit you should have when it comes to any sort of programming, I want to check if this does not return as true. So doing this is just simply all we have to do to check if this is a proper email. The next one we want to do here is to check if the passwords are matching. So again, we're going to copy the function inside our functions document. And I want to change the name to pwd match, like so. And I want to make sure I pass in the password and the password repeat, because those are the two things that are matching with each other. So what I'm going to do inside this if statement is I want to make sure that variable password is not equal to variable repeat or password repeat. Because if this one is not equal to the other one, then we of course have an error happening. We want to make sure that these two are the same thing. Otherwise the user made a mistake when they typed in the password and they have to redo it. So if they made a mistake, then we send them back with a true statement, which means that there was an error. And we just basically send them back to the sign up page to redo the thing. And then we have the last one. This one is the most complicated one of them all. And don't worry, we're gonna get through it. It's gonna be simple as this tutorial here. I don't know, I couldn't come up with an example. So we're gonna go and make this function here. So I'm just gonna copy the function, paste it below. I'm just gonna go and change the name of it. So we have UID exists, which is basically checking if the username already exists inside the database. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna go and delete everything we have inside the function because we don't actually need to have that. And the first thing we need to do in order to test if the username exists inside the database is we need to actually connect to the database and see if the username that was submitted is already inside the database table that we just created. So what we need to do is we need to create a basic SQL statement. So I'm going to create a variable called SQL. I'm going to set it equal to a SQL statement. So I'm going to say select all from the users table where users UID, which is the column that we created inside the users table, is equal to question mark. Now the question mark is a placeholder because we're going to be using prepared statements in order to connect to the database, which means that we don't just take the data that the user gave us and just immediately send it to the database, because that's not too good because it leaves you open to SQL injection and other sorts of things. So what we want to make sure we do here is that we send in our SQL statement to the database first. And then we're going to fill in the blanks or fill in the placeholders later on by providing the data, which in this case is going to be the variable username. Now, what we can also do just as a bonus is we can go ahead and check if the email has already been taken as well. Just, because I get questions about it, let's just go ahead and do it. So what I'll do here is I'll also say, or users email, which is another column that we have inside the database, is equal to question mark. Then I want to close off with a semicolon and also close off with a semicolon at the end here. The first semicolon is to close off the SQL statement. The second one is to close off the PHP code. Okay, it's two different things. Now, because we added in the check for the email, we of course also need to add in a second parameter. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste and just change this one to email. And we do also need to go back up inside the actual sign up page where we do actually check for these sort of things and add in the email here as well. So we're just going to say email, because we need to pass it into the function to actually test if the email has been taken. With this, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start with our prepared statement, because we need to submit this SQL statement to the database in the proper way. So on the next line, we're going to go ahead and create a prepared statement. So we're going to say variable stmt. We're going to set equal to, and then set equal to a function called MySQLi underscore stmt underscore init, which stands for initialization. So we're initializing a new prepared statement. Now, in order to actually initialize this prepared statement, we do need to tell it what the connection is to the database. So I'm going to pass in the connection, which is variable con. And then what I want to do is, after we initialize the new prepared statement, is I want to actually use the SQL statement up here to prepare this prepared statement with the SQL statement. Does that make sense? Is that confusing to say? Okay, let me go and explain it in this way instead so you understand. The user is actually right now able to go inside our sign-up form, write in some code instead of just writing in, the name and their email and stuff. And by writing code into the inputs, they can actually destroy or change our database in any sort of way they want to. To prevent this, we want to make sure we use prepared statements to make this more secure. Okay, so that's basically what we're doing here. We're creating a prepared statement by writing this line of code, and then afterwards we're tying this SQL statement to the prepared statement to make sure it runs into the database without any input from the user, and then later on we add the input from the user to run them separately. That will prevent any sort of code to get injected into our database. So with that explained, let's go down to the next line. Let's create an if statement. And inside the if statement, I want to check if this prepared statement will fail or succeed when I try to run this SQL statement in the database. Because if there is a mistake, let's say I wrote users with 2 S's or something, this will actually return as a false preparation, or whatever you might call it, because there is a mistake inside the SQL statement. So what I want to do is I want to check for any sort of mistakes that might happen here. So I'll say that I have a MySQLi underscore stmt underscore prepare parentheses. And I want to check if this one fails, because we always check if things fails before we check for succeeds. That's just a general rule in PHP or any programming language. So I'm going to write an exclamation mark in front of it. And I want to go ahead and pass in 2 different parameters. First, the statement that we just created, and then the SQL statement that we created up here. So now we're saying, okay, run this SQL statement inside the database and see if there's any sort of errors. If there is an error, it will go ahead and send the user back to the sign up page with an error message saying something like, there was a random error or something. So what I'll do is I'll just copy the header up here, paste it in, and it's just going to send the person back to the sign up page, and the error will be something like stmt failed, just like, and the statement failed or something. So with this, we checked for an error message. If, however, this does not fail, then we want to start passing in the data from the user. So what I'll do is I'll create a built-in function called MySQLi underscore stmt underscore bind underscore param for parameters, parentheses, semicolon. And what I do here is I first of all say, okay, where is our prepared statement? It is up here called variable stmt. The next thing I want to tell it is what kind of data am I submitting to this? Is it a string? Is it an integer? What exactly am I submitting here? In this case here, I'm just submitting a couple of strings, which means that I am submitting a username and an email. It's just basic text. So I'm going to write SS inside as our second parameter, because we have 2 strings. If I were to have a third string up here, I would have to write another S in here just to point it out. And the next parameters is going to be the actual data submitted by the user. So if the user submitted 2 pieces of data, like in this example here, then we just simply pass them in here, like so. If there's a third one, we just add a third one. That's just how it functions. So we just go ahead and pass in the data from the user. And now that we bound the data from the user to the actual statement, then we can actually go ahead and execute the statement. So I'm just going to write MySQLi underscore stmt underscore execute. If I can write that correctly. There we go. And I want to make sure I pass in the statement because we need to tell which statement are we actually executing. So now what I want to do is I actually want to grab the result from the database, because what I'm basically doing is I'm grabbing data. If I'm actually grabbing a user from the database by referring to this username and email, then it means that the user exists in the database. And right now we're checking if the user does not exist in the database, because I don't want to sign this person up if the username or the email is already in the database, right? So that's how that functions. So below here, I want to grab the data. So I'm going to say we have a variable called result data, set it equal to MySQLi underscore stmt underscore get underscore result. And what I want to do here is I want to get the results from this particular prepared statement that we just created up here called stmt. Remember, all the information that we're doing here, the parameters that we're binding, the results that we're getting, everything is tied to this particular variable here called statement, because that's our prepared statement inside our code. And what I want to do now is I want to run an if statement, and all I'm doing is I'm checking if there is a result from this particular statement here. So what I want to do is I want to say MySQLi underscore fetch underscore assoc, which means that I'm fetching the data as an associative array, which is going to be just an array with, the columns set to their names inside the array. And I want to see if there's anything using result data. So basically, if I do get some data from the database, this is going to return as true. If not, it is going to return as false. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and go down and create an else statement. And inside the else statement, I just simply want to say variable result is going to be set equal to false. And then we just simply want to return this variable here. So return variable result. Now, the reason that we haven't written anything inside the if statement yet is going to probably confuse you for now. Because what I want to do is I want to give this function a second purpose. And this is not going to make sense at the moment, but it will once we get a little bit later on into this tutorial here. So what I want to do is if there is data inside the database with this username, then I want to grab the data with the username. And the reason that is something that we could use this function for to give it an alternate purpose is because once we need to log in the user to the database, we're basically going to be checking for the same thing. But if this returns as true instead of false, then we want to continue doing whatever we're doing inside the login form. So if this returns as false inside our sign up form, we're getting the result that we want. If this returns as true, then we get what we want inside the login form, if that makes sense. Well, it will make sense once we get to the login form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a variable row equal to this function here. And this is still going to return as true if there's data inside this particular function, but it will also assign the data to variable row at the same time. So we're just basically creating a variable while checking for true or false inside this function here. Then inside the if statement, what I want to do is I just simply want to return row, which means that I'm returning all the data from the database if this user exists inside the database. And then once we get to the login form, we get to create the login script, we can actually use this data to log in the user. So this function, like I said, has multiple purposes. We can use it for the sign up form, and we can also use it for the login form. That's kind of nice, I think. And then the last thing we're going to do inside this function is just simply close down the prepared statement that we created in here. So I'm going to say MySQLi underscore stmt underscore close parentheses, and then we're going to paste in the statement like so. So now that we create the last error handler for inside our signup script, we can actually go ahead and create the function that will actually sign the user up inside our website. So what I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to copy paste the function we just created, which was called, let's see if I can get it here, UID exists. So I'm going to copy it, paste it below, and I'm just simply going to change the name of it. So right now we just pasted UID exists. So I'm going to change the name to create user instead. So I'm going to copy it and paste it in. Make sure there's no semicolon behind there. And now that we did that, we can actually go ahead and move this up again and just see it in full view because we have everything that we need. And what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to change the code slightly. So instead of checking for a username, we're actually going to sign up the person inside the website. So instead of saying select all from users, which is basically selecting data from the database, instead, I'm going to insert data into the database. So I'm going to delete everything in here except the semicolon at the end there. And I'm going to create an insert statement. So insert into users, parentheses, values, parentheses. And then inside the first parentheses here, we're just simply going to state the different columns inside the database, and they have to be in the proper order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, the first one is called users name. And you might ask yourself, how do I know what these are called? Well, we did actually create them inside our database. So the first one is user's name, user's email, user's ID, and user's password. Now the first column here called user's ID, remember this one is auto incremented, which means that it automatically creates this by itself. We don't have to do anything about it, just let it do its own thing. So when we do actually insert people into the database, just go ahead and start with user's name. So I'm going to say user's name, user's email, user's ID or UID in fact, and user's password, PWD. Then inside the values, we're going to insert the actual values that is going to be inserted by the users. So all the stuff that's typed into the sign up form. So what I'll do here is we're going to be using placeholders because remember we're running prepared statements. So I'm going to say question mark, and we're going to do this 4 times because we have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of data and question mark. There we go. Then inside our prepared statement, we're going to do a lot of the same stuff here. We're going to go ahead and initialize a new prepared statement using the connection to the database. Then we're going to check if this is going to fail. Like, is this actually possible inside the database given the information with this table here? If it does not fail, then we continue down to actually bind parameters to it. Now, we do need to change these parameters, of course, because we don't have 2 pieces of data. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of data. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to go ahead and fill in the proper data here. So we have the name, the email, then we have the username, and we have the password. But now there's going to be a thing here that we need to talk about, which is hashing the password. Because right now, if I were to just insert the password into the database, if there was a hacker or if some person were to gain access to the database, they would know all the passwords of all the users inside the database. So we need to make this a little bit more difficult to understand. So we're going to do something called hashing to the password to make it into a bunch of gibberish or some random strings and symbols to make it unreadable. So what I'm going to do is before we actually bind the parameters here, I'm going to add in a variable called hashed password or hashed PWD. I'm going to set it equal to a function built into the PHP language called password underscore hash. And I think it's important to point out that hashing methods have changed over time when it comes to the PHP language. The difference though is that this password underscore hashing method here is automatically being updated to make sure that if there were some kind of hacker or something, like if the hashing is no longer a good hash, PHP automatically goes in and updates it to make sure it's secure again. So this is the latest form of hashing algorithm from my understanding when it comes to PHP. So we're going to go ahead and say password underscore hash, and we're going to go ahead and include the password that was submitted by the user, which is variable password. Then I want to say, okay, so this is the password, and now I want to hash it. So we're going to say password underscore default. which means that we're using the default password hashing algorithm in order to hash this password. And with this, we're gonna go ahead and replace password inside the bound parameters down here with the new hashed password. Then what we're gonna do once we need to lock in the user into the website a little bit later is we need to check if this hashed password matches up with what the user is typing in when they want to log into the website. And don't worry, we'll get to that a little bit later. So after doing this, all we need to do here is we need to execute the statement. And then right below here, we're gonna go ahead and close the statement. So we can actually just copy the closing statement from the bottom here. And we're just gonna go ahead and delete everything leading up to the execute. Then I'm gonna pass in the closing of the statement. And all we need to do now is just simply send the user back to, I don't know, the front page or something, you know, wherever you want to send the user once they signed up successfully. In my case here, I'm gonna send the user back to the sign up page with a sign up success message. So I'm gonna say, okay, error is equal to none, because there was no errors when you tried to sign up inside the website here. So with this, we have a login system. At least we have the sign up part of a login system. Let's go ahead and test it out. Now, do keep in mind that I already have some data inside the database. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and delete my data from the database just to make sure we're in the same place. So going into our website, we're going to go ahead and test this thing out. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in some information. I'm going to say Daniel Nilsson, type in an email of some sort, crossing as a username, 123 as a password, and sign up. And we get a unexpected comma on line 16 inside functions.inc.php. So I did make an error. So let's just go ahead and see what I did here. Okay, so going into line 16, we need to make sure we don't close off the parentheses here, because that is not a good idea. And we also need to add in a second parentheses at the end here, because remember, we're closing off this parentheses at the end, and we're also closing off the function parentheses. So make sure there's two parentheses here and not a parentheses over here, okay? We get more errors. Okay, so on line 38, there's an extra parentheses at the end there. So, see, people like me make mistakes too, okay? So it's okay. I'm getting suspicious about this now. And we're getting more. Inside our UID exist function, inside our functions.inc.php, we also need to go down here and make sure we close off with a semicolon. If you did that, good for you. But apparently I forgot to do so. So going back into the website, trying again. Let's see if this is working. And as you can see, we get error is equal to none inside the URL up there. So if I were to go inside the database and just sort of refresh, you can actually see that we have a user inside the database. In my case here, he's going to be user number 5 because I did already delete some users. This should not bother you. Leave it alone. Don't change it to number 1 by double clicking it and changing it. It has to be what it is, okay? So as you can see, we also have the hashed password in here, which means that we did hash it correctly. It is not readable because remember, I just typed in 123. It definitely does not say 123 here. So with this, we basically have a sign-up system, but what I want to do is I want to create a couple of different error messages inside the sign-up form if the user does not sign up correctly. Or if he does actually sign up correctly, let's go ahead and actually tell the user that he's signed up correctly. So going into our code, we're going to go to signup.php. Remember, I said we're going to return to this file because we were going to include some error messages at the bottom. So underneath our form, we're going to go ahead and say that we want to include some PHP code. And we could actually technically, in this case here, we could just, do it here. But let's go ahead and just pretend that you might have some content you want to have afterwards here. So just to mess it up for you, let's just go ahead and open up a new pair of PHP tags here. Inside the PHP tags, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check for a if statement. And inside the if statement, I want to check if a certain URL exists inside the URL. So what I want to do here is I want to say is set parentheses, which we've used before in order to check if the person actually had submitted the form correctly, remember, on the previous page. And in here, what I want to do is I want to check for a super global called _get. Now, when we check for a _post, we're checking for data inside the URL, which we can't see. When we check for _get, we're checking for data inside the URL that we can see. And if I were to go inside my website here, a very quick way to just sort of tell if this is the thing that you need to write is that we can see that it says $error equal to none. As soon as there's something equal to something inside the URL, it is a get method. If it said nothing, then it would be a post method, okay? So in this case here, we're checking for, a get method. So going inside our code again, I want to check for a get method called error, just to see if it exists. And if it does exist, then I want to check what the error messages possibly could be. So inside the if statement, I want to create another if statement. And inside the condition, I want to check if this $_get error is equal to empty input. So in this case here, if the user forgot to type something into one of the inputs inside the form, it would return empty input after the equal sign. So if it does this, I want to just sort of return, some sort of message here. I could go ahead and say, I want to echo a paragraph that says, you forgot to, or fill in all fields, for example. And then what we do here is we just go below and say else if. We also want to go ahead and check if it's equal to another error message, which in this case here could be invalid UID, which is just without capitalized letters. And if this is the case, we just write some sort of error message here. So it could be, choose a proper username. Then we just copy paste the else if statement until, we don't have more error messages to write. So we can just do it a couple of times. The next one is going to be equal to invalid email. And we're just going to say choose a proper email. Then we want to change the next one to passwords don't match, like so. And then we just write passwords doesn't match. We also had one called statement failed. So STMT failed. We'll go and right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and say something went wrong, because in this case here, we're starting to get into an area where it's a bit too technical for users to sort of understand what they did wrong. So we're just going to go and write something like something went wrong, try again. Because the user shouldn't be expected to know this sort of technical error message. So something went wrong. And then we need to copy it one more time for a username that might have been taken. And we also want to make sure that we get a message if the user typed the right information and everything went smoothly and went the correct way. So for the next one, we want to write username taken. And we just want to say, choose another username or something like that. Username already taken. And then down here, we want to say error equal to none and just say you have signed up. So just to kind of show what we're doing here, if I go back inside the web page, refresh, you can see, oh, actually, let's actually go ahead and move this up because I don't think it's in the right spot. So we're going to grab everything. Sorry about that, by the way. I know errors like this can be a little bit confusing if you're already struggling. So we're going to go ahead and move it up right before the section tag closes, at least in my code here and my HTML markup. Right before the HTML tag there. So with this going in here, because as you can see right now it's down there, if I refresh, it now says you have signed up. And if there would have been an error message, like username taken, it would have been username taken instead. The error message depends on what is being sent back into the URL, and that's just simply how that works. So with all of this, we now need to start on the login script. So going inside our login.inc.php file, which we also created at some point, it is completely empty because, of course, we didn't create anything in here yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my PHP tags, not going to close them because we talked about that. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to check if the user accessed this page the proper way by actually submitting the form. So again, just like before, inside the signup.inc.php file, we're going to check for an isSet, parentheses, and we're going to check for a superglobal called $_post, which is in capitalized. And we're going to check for one called submit. The next thing we want to do is we want to grab the data from inside the URL, just like before, inside the signup.inc.php file. So we're just going to say variable username is going to be equal to $_post, brackets, and say if the user passed in a UID. Now do remember that if I were to go back inside the login.php file, we have two inputs. We have one, which can be the username or the email. I made a typo there as well. I don't know what's up with me today. I'm making so many typos. Username or email, and we also have a password. Now, don't worry too much about the fact that it's username or email when it comes to the name here, because it might confuse you if you're thinking that, okay, well, how is this going to work out? Because, you know, we want to decide what the user is giving us. So if I were to go back inside our login.inc.php, we're just going to go ahead and grab it and just name it username. Even if it's the email they send us, it's going to be named username now. Okay, that's how it's going to work. So we're going to copy this, paste it down. And we're also going to grab the password. So here we're going to call this one pwd, and the same thing in here. And just like before, again, it's a lot of repeat we're doing here. We're going to go and reference to the two different documents that we also reference to inside the signup.inc.php, which is the database file and the functions file. So we're going to say we want to require _once a dbh.inc.php, close it off. I have to stop making errors now, so preferably close off each line. And we're also going to connect to functions.inc.php. Now, once we've done this, we want to start doing error handlers one more time, just like inside the previous sign up form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference to, let's not type everything from now on. Let's just copy paste what we've already done. So I'm going to go inside my sign up page, and I'm just going to copy one of these different functions here, which is an error handler. Go back, paste it in, change the function. So now it doesn't say empty input sign up. Instead, it says empty input login. And we're just going to go ahead and check for username and password. And then everything else here doesn't really matter. Now we do also want to change the link here because we don't want to be sent back to sign up. We want to be sent back to login.php, and it's just going to be as an error called empty input. If there's something else you want to check for, you can just go ahead and type it in here, and you can come up with as many error handlers as you want to. That's just completely up to you. After the error handlers here, we're going to go ahead and log in the user. So I'm going to call a function called login user, parentheses, semicolon, and there's going to be 3 parameters in here. First is going to be the connection to the database, because in order to log in a user, we need to be able to connect to the database. And the second parameter is going to be the username, and the third one is going to be the password. So with this, we also want to make sure that if the user accessed this page incorrectly, we also, with an else statement, send them back to the login form. So what I want to do here is I just want to go ahead and again create a header. I'm just going to copy from my notes here because we've done it before. I'm just going to go ahead and create a header that says I'm going to send them back to the login page, and then I'm also going to make sure to exit the script here. So this is very simple, at least if we compare it to the sign up form. So now what we need to do is we just need to create 2 functions inside the functions document. We need to create empty input login, and we also need to log in the user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my functions document, I'm going to move it down, and I'm going to go ahead and just scroll down so we can see the function name at the top here, and just make sure we can see the functions document. What I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to copy the top one that we created for the sign up, which was to check for empty inputs, because this is going to be very similar since this is it's basically the same thing we're checking for here. So I'm going to go down to the bottom, I'm going to paste it in, and I'm going to change it to empty input login. And I'm just simply going to change the parameters to match the function we wrote up here. I'm going to delete all the different empty functions here as well, because we don't need them all, just need 2. I'm going to check for an empty username and an empty password. And that's basically it. So we're going to go ahead and create the next one here, which is login user. So I'm going to copy the function, I'm going to paste it below, and I want to make sure it says we're creating a function called login user, and then curly brackets afterwards. Now, remember that we already went in and created a function previously where I said that, oh, it had 2 purposes. Well, we're going to go ahead and use that function right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a variable, and I'm going to call this one UID exists, which means that we're checking if the user that he typed in the username for or the email already exists inside the database, okay? And I want to set it equal to the function we created previously. So if I were to scroll up here to not create user, but UID exists. I'm just going to go ahead and copy what we have here, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste it in down here. So we're going to say paste it in. Now, one thing that is going to confuse you here is the fact that inside our UID exists, we have an email submitted that needs to go inside this function here, but we don't actually have both a username and an email from the user when he logs in. We just have one of them. So either the username or the email. So how are we going to do this? Well, it's going to be very simple, because inside the UID exists function, if I were to scroll up to it here, you can see that inside the database, we're asking for either a username or an email in order for this to be correct, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and pass in variable username into both of these down here. So I'm going to copy it, paste it inside both parameters, and when this returns, it will just automatically fit into one of those two we asked about inside the SQL statement. So doing this means that if the user were to go into the website and try to log in, and he were to use his username to do so, then it will make this statement here true, which means that we're still grabbing the data, and this one over here is going to be false, which doesn't matter because one of these needs to be true. On the other hand, if he did decide to use his email address in order to log into the website, this statement over here is going to be true, and this one over here is going to be false. But remember, just one of them needs to be true. So this is going to be just fine. We're just going to go ahead and add in the username for both of these parameters here. So the next thing we're going to do here is we're just going to run a quick error handler inside this function. We're going to go ahead and check if this function here actually returns as false. Because if it returns as false, it means that the username or the email that he tried to log in with does not exist inside the database. So we just want to, just include that extra error handler there just in case. So I'm going to say we have an if statement, and I'm just going to go ahead and say if variable UID exists is equal to false. Then we're just going to go ahead and send him back to the login page with an error message. So we're just going to say, we're going to create a header, and we're just going to send him back to the login page with just like the wrong login or something. So what we've done so far is we grabbed the data from the database with this username or email that the user used. And with that data, the first thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and check the password, because remember we hashed it. So the password that the user just submitted to us, we need to check that version with the hashed password inside the database, essentially. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to go and create a variable, and we're going to call this one password, so pwd hashed. And we're going to go ahead and set this one equal to the data from the database, the password that is inside the database with that user that the user tried to log in as. So we're going to go ahead and say, well, we have UID exists. And because this is a associative array, if I were to go back up into UID exists, you can actually see that all the data that we're getting from the database gets returned as an associative array. Means that if I were to reference to a piece of the data, I just simply reference to the column name, because an associative array, if we remember PHP, is an array where it doesn't use index numbers, but instead it's using names for each index inside the array. So the names are just simply the name of the columns inside the database. So we're just simply going to write in the name of the database column inside the users table that we want to grab. So if we were to say, well, okay, I want password hashed to be equal to the column called users pwd, which is the password that we have inside the database, then right now we just grab the data from the database and set it equal to this variable here. So now we have database data that we can use inside our code. So now the next step is just simply checking whether the database password matches with what the user submitted to us. So the way we can do this is using a very simple function. So I'm going to say we have a variable called check password, or pwd, is going to be equal to a function called password underscore verify, parentheses. And inside password underscore verify, we're just simply going to pass in the password that the user gave us, which is variable pwd, and the password from inside the database, like so. And if these two matches, it's going to return as true. If it doesn't match, it's going to return as false. So all we need to do here is go down to the next line and say we want to create an if statement where we say, okay, well, does check password equal to false. Because if it does return as false, it means that the two passwords, the password from the database and the password the user gave us are not the same thing. So, he basically wrote an incorrect password. So with this, we can actually go ahead and send the user back using a header, again, just like we did before, to the login page with an error message saying wrong login. Then afterwards, we can also say, okay, but else if this was actually returning as true. So we're just going to copy this. Say if it returned as true, then what we want to do is we want to lock in the user into the website. And this is where we need to start talking about sessions. Now, in order to store data inside a session, which is basically information you can grab onto from anywhere inside the website, as long as we have a session running, we need to start a session first. And that means that we need to go inside here, inside the else if statement, and create a function that is built into PHP called session_start. If I can spell that correctly, there we go. And I'm just simply going to start up a new session here. So now that we have a new session started, I can go ahead and create session variables, which is also a superglobal. So if I were to go ahead and say that we want to create a superglobal called variable_session, brackets, is equal to, and then I want to give this session superglobal some kind of name. So in this case here, I want to say, okay, well, this superglobal could, for example, be the user ID, which is the ID inside the database, the one we're not allowed to change. And a very simple way to do this is, again, just like before, we go in and reference to the UID exists, which got returned to us, and say that we don't want to grab the user's password, but the user's ID, semicolon. Then we just go ahead and copy this, paste it down, because maybe I also want to grab the username just to have it accessible a little bit easier. So UID, like so. And then also grab it from UID inside the database. And then last but not least, we want to just send the user back to the, well, let's just go ahead and send them back to the front page because that makes sense. So I'm going to send them back to index.php. And just not write anything here. I don't think that's necessary. So just send them back to the front page. And that's pretty much it. We have a fully functioning login system right now, basically. We do need to do one more thing, which is to change the links inside the navigation in case we are logged in or if we're not logged in. We also need to create some error messages in case the user is logging in wrong using the login form. So there's a couple more things we need to do in order to be like completely done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start by creating those error messages inside the login form. So I'll just go back inside our signup.php file. Let's actually go ahead and move this up here because there's no need to have it down here. So by going into signup.php, I'm just simply going to copy all this error message, nonsense that we wrote here. And I'm going to go into the login.php file instead and just paste it in the same place. So now all we need to do is we need to match this up to make sure that it matches up with all the error messages we wrote inside our function there. So going into our login.inc.php file, I want to check for empty input. So, okay, we're just going to go back again to login.php. And it does actually have it here, so we don't need to change anything there. I do also want to go into functions.inc.php and just kind of check the function if we have any error messages. We have wrong login. We need to make one for that one. And that's basically it. So for the next one here, we're not going to say invalid UID. We're going to check for wrong login and just say incorrect login information or something. Something you can write that might make more sense. And then just delete the rest of them because we don't actually need these. Do be careful you don't delete any accidental curly brackets here that should have been there, just pointing that out. And now we just need to go in and change the navigation based on if the user is logged in or not. So going inside our header file, because remember we split up our website into headers and footers and such things. So we're going to go into the header file where we have the navigation. And right before the sign up and login links, I'm going to go ahead and include some PHP code like so. And inside this PHP code, I'm going to create a if statement because first of all, I want to check is the user logged in. And this, by the way, is the same way you change content for the user based on if they're logged in or not. So what you're learning right now is the same method you use in order to, let's say, show some other information on a front page or a profile page or something. You know, depending on if the user's logged in or not, it's the exact same thing you're doing as we're doing right here. So with this, I'm just going to go ahead and say that we have is set inside this if statement. And I'm going to check for a super global called session and check for the session called users UID. This is actually incorrect because we called it user UID without any capitalized letters. And I'm going to go ahead and check if this just exists inside our website, because if this exists, it means the user is logged in. Then all we do in here is we just simply echo out a navigation. So if I were to say echo and just simply grab what we have down here and paste it in like so, we can actually go ahead and make sure that we are echoing 2 lines of code instead of 1 big line like so. Now, right now, we're actually checking if the user is logged in. So these links are actually not correct. So we do need to change them. So instead of sign up, we're going to go ahead and say, I don't know, profile, because that makes sense for the next tutorial, profile.php. And we're just going to call this one profile page, I guess. Then we call the next one logout. And then I want to create an else statement. So we say else. If the user is not logged into our website, then we just want to do, you know, the exact same thing as we had down here originally. So we can just actually go ahead and copy all the data here, so it matches up with what we have in here, like so, and like so. And then we just delete these. So now the only sort of navigation that we show, or links inside the menu that we show, that is related to logging in or signing up to the website is going to be inside these if-else statements here. So with this, we just have one last thing we need to do, because in order to access this session variable, remember I said we needed to have a session running inside the website to access these things. That means that we have to go at the very top of the website, and up here, we're going to open up a pair of PHP tags. PHP, not PVP, that's something else. And in here, we're just going to go ahead and say session underscore start, which means that on every single page inside the website, because we're, you know, including this header inside every page inside the website, we will now have a session started on every single page, which means that the user is going to be logged in on every single page inside the website. Okay, so before we actually test this thing, I just really quickly want to fix an error that I made inside my HTML. So right now, if I were to fill something into the login form inside both inputs, it actually tells me that I have empty fields. The reason for that is that if I were to go inside my login.php file and go up into the form, I right now have my username email placeholder set to name instead of UID. So if I were to go back inside my login.inc.php, we actually have the proper data sent over just to sort of fix that. So going back into the website, you can now see that it says, need to refresh it really quick. It now says wrong login, like it's supposed to. But with this, we can actually go ahead and try and log this person in. So if I were to choose crossing 1, 2, 3, you can now see that we're sent back to the front page because we're now logged in. It says profile page up here. It says logout. So the last thing we need to create now is just basically a logout page where we can log out the user. And that is super quick to do. So going inside our website here, we're going to go ahead and create a new file inside our project folder here. We can actually go ahead and just create it directly inside our includes folder, just to skip a step there. So inside the includes folder, I'm going to create a new file called logout.inc.php. And inside this file here, we're just going to open up the PHP tags. And what we're going to do in here is we're just going to completely destroy the session variables inside our current session. Because remember, right now, the way that the website knows that we're logged into the website is by checking if there is some session variables inside our session. So we just completely delete them in order to lock out the user. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start a session, because without starting a session, we can't actually delete the session variables. Then we're gonna go ahead and say we want to say session underscore unset, just to kind of unset any sessions you might have. And then we're gonna say session underscore destroy. This is basically going to lock out the user, but we also want to make sure we send the user back to the front page after they log out. So we're just gonna go ahead and include a header function. Just gonna copy it from somewhere else. Gonna send the person back to index.php, like so. Then if we were to go inside the header, we just simply link to this document here. So down where we had the logout.php, we actually want to link to the includes folder / logout.inc.php. And I think we're done. So let's go ahead and go back inside our website, refresh it, click log out. And as you can see, we're now logged out from the website. Now, just as a sort of bonus thing, if you want the, some sort of message to pop up when you log into the website, what you can do is you can go ahead and say, well, hello there, Mr. Crossing, or something on the front page when you log in. So let me just go ahead and copy the PHP we have inside our header, the PHP file, the part that checks if we do have a session variable. If so, then do something. Just gonna copy that, go into my index page and paste it into, let's say, just a section here. Make sure we actually also paste in the PHP opening and closing tags, like so. And what I'm just simply gonna do here is I'm just gonna change whatever it says in here. So instead, it's just gonna echo a paragraph that says, let's say, paragraph, closing paragraph. It's just simply gonna say, hello there, space. Then we want to close off what we have here. And then we just simply include the username, which in this case here is just going to be exactly what we have up here as well. So we're just going to paste that in. And of course, we also want to delete whatever is down here. So I'm just not going to check for any else statement, because if the user is not logged in, I don't want to show anything else on the website. So with this here, what we can do is I can go back to the website, and I can go and sign up as another person just to double check. It does give me the right error messages here. So I'll just go ahead and sign up as Basic Crossing, which is the name of my dog sitting over here. He's gonna have the same email address just to sort of test it out. Ooh, we can't have that. Same username, 123. Oh, username already taken. So it does work, just to sort of test it out. So let's go and give him a new email address, and his username is going to be Besse123 sign up. You have signed up. Okay, log in. Username Besse123, and it says hello there, Besse, inside my website. The last thing I want to show you before we end off the episode is we can also go into login, use our email address 123. And as you can see, it says, hello there, Crossing. So everything is working like it's intended. So this is how we can create a basic login system. And this is what we're going to be using in future episodes, when we're going to start talking about how to create, for example, a profile page where you can go in and actually click on the profile page, and there will actually be a profile page with information about the user. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It is very long. I'm probably going to include at the beginning of the video that, just FYI, this video is going to be very long. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.